All right.
All right, everybody, welcome to episode one of the As Brothers Battle Brothers podcast. I'm Stobbie for 9, joined by my good friend Bosco. How's it going, bud?
Hey, man. It's going well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, actually, it's funny you say me having you. It was your idea to do this thing. Uh, why don't you tell us what the idea was behind, having a little forum for us to discuss Battle Brothers?
Well, as many of the players of Battle Brothers, I tried to watch a couple of people playing it, and obviously always ended up playing myself again. But I always felt like the community is forced in different ways. There's 5 people watching this streamer and then 10 people watching that YouTuber. So I thought it would be cool to have a general discussion of the game that we all love and struggle of.
Well, absolutely. That's a cool idea, and thanks for doing it. The main thing we've got to talk about, the first thing we have to bring up, is the main release, 24th of March, which is what's like a week and a half away. So I'm quite psyched for that, and I've just got the main page for Battle Brothers open now, and I wanted to play the trailer quick because it looks so cool. So for those of you who haven't seen the main trailer, just check this out.
It all
that's
went
wrong.
wrong. It was an ambush. You are left in command now, with what few men remain.
Oh, decapitation.
We've done it before, and we'll do it again. We'll make the company known throughout the land.
Oh, Necro Savants. Oh.
As long as there is blood coursing through our veins, as long as we can hold sword and shield in hand, there shall stand the Battle Brothers.
Oh, hell yeah. Man, I love that trailer. It's so well done. It's just, the only thing is, like, we're supposed to be doing like a little podcast torture thing now, and I just want to go play now because the trailer's got me so hyped up to go play. Yeah.
I will let you back to the playing.
Yeah, man. Just like I get so triggered when I see Necro Savants on any playthrough. The first time I ran into them, I had my standard 2 rows of 6 players, 6 frontliners, sword and shield up front, 2 pikemen on the flanks and the back line, and then 4 archers in the back line in the middle. And I had no idea that these Necro Savants would just teleport to the back and just turn my beautiful level 9 archers into soup meat. It was very, very depressing.
Yeah, this game is pretty well made in order to, like, when you feel like everything is going well, something horrible will happen. I guarantee that, like Necrocerans or something like that. Just you run into, what are these? And then you're fucked.
Well, like a subtext for a lot of the playthroughs I've done, or hell, even maybe my whole YouTube channel in general, is lessons learned in blood. I think that's particularly appropriate here, where the only way you learn about this stuff is by getting your ass kicked and your poor beloved Battle Brothers getting their heads chopped off.
Yeah, I mean that's what the game is about, really.
Yeah, man, it's probably what makes it so good. So let's dive right into the latest patch notes. So we're all now busy playing the latest, I believe it's the final beta update. Now, I think the full release, I don't know if it's going to carry any of its own changes, but for the time being, and as of, what was the date at the last? 10th of March, I think, that beta update 0.9.0.29 came out. Just go ahead and pull up the change notes. Let's just run through these a little bit. We don't need to go through all of them. We'll just have a little discussion and call out some of the most interesting ones.
Yeah,
So
to me, the most important, if you allow me to go first,
yeah, go on.
it was really good to have rotation be available earlier, because I was bumped into raiders at the beginning. You're gonna fight with brigands, and they always pull this trick up, and then you go like, what the fuck, that's not the way I wanted to do this. And then it would be nice to counter it with your rotation or something like that. I
Yeah.
always felt like well, not unfair, but it was really unfortunate in my opinion. And I'm really pleased that now it's available on early on. It can help a lot to keep your brothers alive.
Yeah, I was midway through a playthrough when this change was made, and I was like so pleased with it because the idea was always get rotation to be able to switch guys from the front to back line to keep them alive. But when it was available at level 7, it kind of defeated the purpose because rotation seemed like a skill that you use to help your guys stay alive in the long term, and it just never really worked out that way because getting to rotation was so difficult. Now that it's at level 3, I think it's bloody great.
Yeah, and also we're gonna speak a little bit more of the early game tactic, but it's the very early game is all about keeping your brothers alive, so you don't have to hire new people. So I think it will serve well on the long run.
Indeed. And then for me, the other thing that I wanted to call out, the biggest change that I've liked and enjoyed the most is how they've changed. Well, they've really buffed archers. So now changed line of fire for ranged attacks to no longer be blocked by allies directly adjacent to the attacker. In effect, ranged weapons can now be used more effectively from the back line and behind a shield wall. Oh, baby. So pleased by that. I mean, it got before this change was made, I was toying with the idea of tailoring my squad loadout particularly against the enemies that I'm facing. So what I mean is, like, if I know I'm going up against necro savants, I wouldn't have any archers at all. Or if I know I'm facing just a bunch of orcs, I wouldn't even take archers because they'll get 1 or 2 shots off until the orcs hit your front line, and you would want to switch them to pikes anyway. But this means you don't have to do that, and I think it's overall a huge buff to archers.
Yeah, it's not just archers actually. Like if you have throwing weapons, it's the same for them. So
your famous hoplites, the thrown weapons at both sides. That's pretty cool. That's something we'll get into a little bit later as well. Next on, changed holdout perk to be available earlier. Same logic as the rotation perk being made a bit earlier. Holdout just kind of makes it a lot easier. Keep your guys alive. I haven't actually taken it on anybody just yet. I think it's because, well, you always have that problem when you're deciding what to give your guys. It's not just what perk you're taking, but it's also part of the thought process is what am I not taking by taking this perk. So holdout does seem like something that could be well worth taking, though. Have you used it much?
I don't know. It's kind of because if you get an injury, you're gonna have its effect no matter what. So I don't know. To me, I don't really use that much because again, it sounds like something that is very occasional. Because if you have an injury early on, sure, it is useful. But if you have the injury like in the middle of a battle or at one point where I have an injury, but I can pull it off. I will win this battle. Then it doesn't really help you in this battle. So I'm not a big fan of it. I see the point of it. Whenever I say something against these perks, I don't say there's no benefit of them.
You just got to tailor it. I mean, I can see it being really, really important on one of your high value guys like my Highlanders, who are the two-handed weapon users. I would definitely want to take a holdout on them because if they get, as what always happens when you're fighting against enemy marksmen, the very first marksman will shoot a crossbow and it'll headshot your most valuable guy and give them an injury. So, for example, if your most valuable soldier gets hit with cut arm sinew on turn 1, that's 40% damage reduction for the rest of the battle. So I can kind of see it being super, super useful. I mean, God forbid one of your guys get hit and they get collapsed lung. That's 60% less fatigue. They may as well be out of the fight from then.
Yeah, to me it looks like it's more useful at the late game. You can give it to your taunt and or tank character and just go mental, get into the battlefield, give some damage to the opposition, and even if he gets injured, it doesn't affect him.
Yeah, this kind of leads into one of the larger points about why I love this game so much is that you can theory craft the cows come home what's the optimum build, but there's really kind of no such thing. It's just optimum in terms of what your playstyle is and what you want to achieve. I mean, one of the first things I did when I just started playing the game, I saw, okay, so at night your archers got, at the time it was minus 50% range skill. My archers were terrible, so I was like, okay, I'm not going to use archers. but I'm only going to fight enemies at night wherever possible. And that was really quite viable for a while. They've mostly changed it now, with night only being 30% reduction to ranged skill. And I think not using any archers, you would kind of be shooting yourself in the foot, because most of the time, using 2 archers and 2 crossbowmen, I've been able to outshoot most of the ranged guys I've been fighting. But I love the fact that there is that space for you to be able to do this more than one way.
There's definitely a creative freedom in building your brothers. I have my own way of building them up, but after a while I get bored of them because it's just way too similar to me. But when I hire, usually how I choose between perks is I have my idea of building them up, but then the actual skills will matter. Like I told you before when we started off camera this discussion, I don't really fancy those perks that just gives you some sort of skill points, like Colossus or 45.
Ones that are essentially passives.
They can help you, but if you get someone who barely has any hit points, then it's a smart move to level him up a little bit and then give him that plus 25% of HP. And then you can maybe use him. So there are occasions when it comes really useful.
And just on the subject of the Colossus perk, I'm a big believer in Colossus. I get it on all my frontline guys. Also bear in mind that it's plus 25% not only to existing hit points, but it also, well, it's whatever your hit point value is at the time. And also bear in mind then, if going forward then you roll a 4, it essentially becomes a 5, and it's just gives such a huge bonus to your hit points that really helps your guys. So like you say, put it onto a tank, put it on someone who has stars and hit points. It's very good. Okay, next. So changed underdog perk to completely ignore the surrounded penalty again and to be available later. It kind of made sense. I felt the way that they limited it to only be able to help against 4 enemies to be a touch arbitrary. I still only take it on my Highlanders, who are the 2-handed weapon users and who typically tend to be on the flanks. And generally I find the soldiers who are on the flanks of my formation are the guys who get surrounded.
Again, I didn't really use that much, but because it did sound to me very occasional, and also I like to keep my front line if possible. That's just my style, and then I don't really want anyone to have that many enemies around them. But I think that change is pretty good. I like it.
Kind of makes sense putting it a bit later because it is quite a powerful skill. Next, changed Headhunter to give stacking plus 15 chance, up from 10%, but it's only available later. And incidentally, I can tell you guys, if you are playing on a save file before this change came into effect and you took Headhunter at level 2, you then, patch then happens, your brother using it then won't have Headhunter, but once he hits level 9, he gets it automatically and then spend that perk point something else at level 9. So you don't lose it permanently, you just lose it until you get the level to be able to use it. Headhunter is an interesting one. I've thought about how best to use it, for example, on someone who's going to be a flail specialist, but one of my viewers made a good point that they thought Headhunter is essentially counterproductive, especially so in the late game where helmets tend to be a lot higher value. They have a lot more armor points, and you're going to be hitting the body more often than not. So very often you'll have a situation where you're fighting an enemy who has destroyed body armor and still quite a healthy helmet. So hitting them in the head at that point is not what you want.
Yeah, I always have the fear when I'm thinking about getting Headhunter. It's like, but what if I see a helmet that I really want? Then I don't want to ruin it.
Yeah. Well, then you should have a backup weapon like a dagger or something. Dagger them in the face. I've actually had great success with putting Headhunter onto my archers because the archers don't actually pierce a lot of armor. And for huge swaths of the game, up until like hell, even as far as day 70, very common to find raiders who don't even have any helmet at all. So I'll even on someone, for example, I've got a brother who's a sword specialist. He carries just a sword and a flail, even though he's not a flail specialist, because if he comes across someone who's not wearing a helmet, he just goes straight off them and just pops their head open like a ripe melon with the flail. Really good. The next, changed dodge to no longer deactivate once hit by an attack. I think is great. I think we've got to let's not get stuck on these too much. These are all kind of self-explanatory changes. Change the nimble perk to have new mechanics and provide a damage reduction instead of increased defensive attributes. See tooltip for detailed information. Have you had a chance to look at that yet? Because I actually haven't. I didn't take nimble last time, and I don't believe I've even seen the new change.
I think I did use it, but the thing is, I usually get heavy armor, and obviously it's for the light armor. So again, I usually use this when I have a brother who is very poor on fatigue, because then I can give him a pole arm and put him on the second row and get him this, and hopefully, that and reach advantage if I can reach that point. That's usually how I deal it, but I only use it, to be fair, when I have someone with terrible fatigue.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have been playing around with the idea of making someone inspired by the Bravosi from Game of Thrones, and I'm just blanking on his name now. Who taught Arya, and then you just give him essentially just cloth armor, and you just pump as many points as you can into melee defense, and you give him a sword without a shield. And his whole idea is to use riposte and to be very, very difficult to hit. Interesting, but I can't see him surviving for any length of time. I think that would be a very, very deaded brother.
A big fan of experiments, so I hope we will do it eventually.
Well, we're going to move on to this a little bit later, but perhaps on a themed build, you can do a whole bunch of light armored, a band of Bravosis who eschew using heavy armor and prefer instead to be quick and.
It's just exhausting your enemy.
Okay, so change the rally skill success chance to scale better with resolve of the character using the skill. That just sounds really like a quality of life change where they just had to do. Because I did find rally not working a lot, but in the past, but now seems to be proccing a lot more in terms of stopping panicking brothers. I think it's helped it a lot. Also, its AP cost has dropped from 7 down to 6, so that's good.
That's pretty good, but I have to say it didn't really work for me many occasions in the I don't know, last 2 or 3 days.
Where you've had someone panicking and then you use rally the troops and it fails to stop them from running. You mean?
Yeah.
I've had it happen as well, and in my experience, if a brother is panicking, his base resolve helps as well. So, like if the person who's panicking only has 20 resolve, then the 100 resolve of the person using rally the troops will be less likely to work if the person who's using it on has a higher base resolve.
It must have been the thing there, but I don't know how about you. I usually try to get everyone at least to 40 resolve, which is not that high.
I'm keeping everybody at 45. I tend to, even in the early game, I'll even take resolve on everybody just to get them up to 45, even at the expense of fatigue sometimes, because as we'll discuss in a bit, in the early game, very often you're using very light, fatigue light weapons like spears and swords and any. I found that to be pretty. Next, changed contract payments to be lower in the very late game. I haven't actually got to the very late game, so I imagine it's just a bit of scaling to stop the situation where you get completely flooded with gold in the late game, and gold becomes almost irrelevant.
I don't. It's not that big of a change, I think, because you're gonna get a lot of things to sell anyways from those battles, especially if you just lurk around the map and try to get those ancient things and relics and those kind of things that you can just sell for like 600 or 1,000 golds. So I don't see it that big of an issue. It's probably a smart move in order to get you into, because the very late game could be like you have all the money you want and just get whatever the hell you want, and I think they want to make it fun for the very late game as well. So I think that's a cool change too.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, so changed initiative of ancient dead to be slightly lower. That makes sense. They are disgusting undead. They shouldn't have high initiative. Change Geist to have a higher range defense, but no longer be virtually unhittable with ranged weapons. I did earlier today during my offline campaign have my 80-odd ranged skill archer trying to shoot at a Geist. He had a as high as 28% chance to hit at one point. I've still never been able to kill a Geist with a ranged weapon, but theoretically it seems to be possible now.
I actually did today. It was a a really great archer, and
Hmm.
I actually quick shot 2 of them. I was
Oh,
really
nice.
impressed. I never thought it would happen, but desperate times make
Yeah.
you
Yep.
using desperate moves.
On the point of geese, the most success I've had against them is always keeping. If I know I'm going to be fighting them, I'll make sure everybody can at least switch to a spear other than their main weapon, just to use the spear to try to stab the damn thing. War
Yeah,
dogs are also great against geese, but you just got to put the dog close enough to the ghost. Otherwise, they'll run at the zombie and eat the zombie instead.
yeah.
They changed combat against caravans to no longer require killing the donkeys at the end, which
Oh, thank
doesn't
God.
affect me because I haven't fought any caravans yet. I know you've done a bit of that.
Yeah, it's. I can tell you, it's terrible. They have quite a few hit points,
And you have to hear
and
them screaming
obviously you
and
killed
protesting.
everyone.
Oh man.
You killed everyone who opposed you, and then you just run at them and poke them to death. Like it's an endless struggle because they have so many hit points, and you have to get to the damn thing. I'm so happy with that.
Okay, good. So changed combat against greenskin catapults to no longer require destroying the siege engines manually at the end. Same type of thing, makes sense. Fixed potential crash as greenskin catapults get destroyed with certain skills. I don't know what skills those are, but again, that's just quality of life. Fixed potential crash with fulfilling contracts. I don't think I've had any of those. And then the rest of these are all just fixing issues, which I don't think we really need to go over.
I don't think I've experienced any of these issues. The only issue I had is that I don't get attacked by escort missions for some reason. I
Are
can
you?
always take them. I get a bunch of crowns for it. I can travel the world without
Mm.
losing food, and and then there's that. I don't know what's up with that,
Escort
but
missions are they are. I've had such variable success with them both across the current patch and the previous one. Either, as you say, it's smooth sailing and it's a few hundred, crowns in your pocket for nothing, or
yeah,
it's day 12 and you get hit by 10 greenskins and you get squad wiped or you have to run away. But generally, I think you're right. I think the caravan guarding missions have been normalized, if you will, to make them a little bit easier to do. So,
it could be because the AI is getting. It's weird to say that, but it feels like it's getting smarter and smarter. And while I
yeah.
see raiding parties appearing, they never attack me. Maybe they are not strong enough to attack the caravan, and they decide to not attack.
Yeah, so just taking a look on the forums around one of the change logs, there was an interesting comment made by user Wargasm. Admittedly, it's 23rd of February he made this, so it might be from a previous build, but he did point out a couple of interesting things, particularly here. So Raiders no longer have plus 10 melee defense, plus 5 range defense, and so are easier to hit in the early game. I've definitely found that to be the case. The early game seems to be getting a lot more manageable, and I've even gotten to the point where I'll have 8 or 10 very basic brothers, levels 1 and 2, and I've even taken on 4 or 5 raiders and been able to kill them. Whereas in the past, I've always felt that your first few raider interactions, you just have to get to the road and pull them into a supply caravan or someone to help you fight with them. So that's a nice change.
There's definitely some changes in the very early game, so it would be more manageable. I remember, like, I've been playing Battle Brothers with a few months of pauses here and there for a year, and I remember the struggling of the beginning because I didn't know anything about the game, and I kept running into something that was too big for me to
And you
take
just
on.
get steamrolled. Yeah.
Although I admit I would love to be in a like I would love if you had the option to start with whatever happens, like a very crazy mode where it's not that forgiving at the beginning, because that's exciting. It's
Well,
a struggle, but it makes it
in my
exciting.
experience, that is the case when you play on the highest difficulty anyway. But it might not be exactly what you were looking for. But one other thing I wanted to call out that he wrote here, which I just love the way he put it. So, talking about reach advantage has been made almost useless, like Nimble was before, and it will now be harder for deserters clad in scale armor to casually scythe through thongs of orc warriors with their 35 hit points and 7 resolve, but still at confident morale because some chap hiding in the bushes a few tiles away keeps blowing a trumpet. And that just kind of reminds me of the change that I think needed to be made to rally the troops. Whereas, remember, in a few patches past, you could just use rally the troops and it would take guys from even morale up to confident. It was essentially just a press this button to give everybody around you plus 10 melee skill.
Yeah.
I think it's a change they had to make.
Yeah, I think they made a lot of changes that helped you. So in order to keep the balance, they had to nerf it a little bit. I've seen many people getting upset about this change actually, because I guess that was everyone's thinking. Like, okay, I will just spam this thing and no one will run away from the battle.
Well, the thing is, I saw the change as well, and my first thought was, oh, well, that sucks. But then immediately, it kind of makes sense though, because it's kind of lame to just spam rally the troops, because the whole point of it is to rally troops who are breaking, not buff the troops, or basically be like an MC with a mic in the back, just hyping up your brothers. Like, maybe I could see some sort of space if you give it onto an actual bard, because you can actually hire bards, and maybe that could be their event. Like if you hire a bard specifically, let them equip their loot. Then if they use rally the troops with the loot, then you can do it that way. I've never seen a reason to be able to use a bard. Their stats are terrible. So, something to think about.
Yeah,
okay.
that's how I like it. I like the idea.
Yeah.
If any developers watching.
Well, we're speaking of which, we'll hope to get some of the devs on at some point, even if just so we can tell them how much we love their game, and they can be all German and humble. Like, oh no, please stop it. So let's move on to our next little bit of discussion, which is early game tactics. So I'm going to talk for a little bit to describe how I find I have the most success, and this little bit of the discussion will be aimed primarily at guys who are new players and who are struggling, or who have only ever played normal and haven't wanted to try the more difficulty. I consider myself a bit of an early game expert because you've seen my YouTube playthroughs. They haven't gone very long, mainly because I haven't been too studious in terms of all the perks and all the details. I kind of just jump in and learn from doing so. I have a lot more early game experience. So what I've found, generally when I'm playing veteran, you start with, I think it's 2,400 crowns, have the initial battle, you go straight to the first little village, and you open up the market. First thing I'll look for is, are there any trade goods? If there are any trade goods there, whatever they are, I'll buy them up immediately. Then I'll go to whoever is there to be recruited and think about hiring them. The classes I look for my first few brothers, and the first bit of money you spend, farmhands are obviously ideal. Also, right from the beginning, don't be afraid to spend 400 gold on a farmhand, especially if he's carrying a pitchfork, because the way I think you should start, get at least, aim for 8, but if you can't get 8, get 7 or 6 brothers. A few on the front with shields and spears, and then you'll have your one guy at the back who has his crossbow, 2 or 3 guys behind them with pitchforks. I like to do that because you're going to be hiring the first 4 or 5 guys, and it's kind of like you just you're putting the lever on a gambling machine, and you're just seeing what the stats are. So you'll hire vagabonds, are cheap, and they can be pretty good. They can have nice fatigue. Farmhands are good. Brawlers, if you can find brawlers in the early game, they're amazing to start with because they're so cheap. A lot of them cost sub 100 gold because they don't come with any gear, and their 11 per day cost doesn't start to hurt you until you've gotten rolling anyway. So that's very. Generally, I'll try to get 3 to 4 guys, like I said, spears, round shields, and a dagger, and then pass out some of the armor you've gotten, and then might have to go to the main city, sell the trade goods that you bought earlier, which gives you hopefully a little bit of profit. And if you can get to the point where you've got 8 guys, like I said, spears and shields up front, a bit of armor on all of them, at least leather armor, but you'd be surprised right at the start, depending on what you find in the markets, you can even get padded armor. I've had starts where I've managed to buy 2 sets of padded armor that were like 100 gold each because they were at 40% repair. You can just repair them up, and that's a really good springboard for your frontline guys. So in the early game, like I said, it's all about spears and pitchforks in the early game, because and it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure this out. The attack that you use with spears, swords, and pitchforks and pikes have plus accuracy. It's 20 for spears and 10 for all the rest. So in the early game, when your guys have such low melee skill, you're really going to struggle to hit anything. And then the daggers you keep on them are there for, like Hogarth in that first battle, I always aim to use the double-handed axe that you have to smash his shield, kill all of his mates, and then you just dagger him to death, because then that's a set of 90 armor right from the start, which is always quite useful. Other than that, then, you should get past that first battle, then you can start jumping around the world, doing jobs here and there. Your first ambition pops up very, very soon. I always used to rush straight for the 12 brothers ambition, because I've always tried to get up to 12 brothers as soon as I can, but I've had a lot more success going for the visit every city on the map ambition, because you need to be going all around the map anyway, just to do a bit of exploring and to see what all the cities have, where the armorers are, where the weaponsmiths are. And I've had quite a lot of success. Just you go to a city that you haven't visited before, take a job, get a bit of money in, especially if it's deliver to this next city. Like, great, I have to go there anyway. So they've effectively paid you to go there.
Yeah.
And as you go through all the cities, especially the larger built-up ones, you can see who's there to be hired. I even got incredibly lucky on one of a playthrough. I managed to hire a militiaman for 500 gold within like the first week, and he had 65 base melee skill and 2 stars, and he was a superstar. That is until he got stabbed with a goblin 2 daggers, but
It's always the
like on that. I hate goblins. So yeah, that's what I tend to focus in on the early game. Farmhands, brawlers.
I can only agree with you. What I like to do at the beginning is to make sure you always have 3 brothers to start with, and they are, in my experience, they are all awesome. They are really good compared to the guys we will get. So the first thing I do, one of them will have a spear and a shield with okay-ish armor for the early game. So that's that. The other person with the 2-handed axe, forget about the axe. It will only get you killed at the early game.
You have to have a shield in the early game.
Melee defense. So the first thing is I give him the best possible equipment, and I keep them in sort of the middle, so they would be harder to get them, surrounded. And then, as you said, I'm looking for. Well, usually it's quantity over quality at the very early game to me. Because I don't feel that bad if they die. I usually buy some pitchforks, 1 or 2, based on, of course, the cities or towns. If you find pitchforks that they're great, I can put someone in the back row. I usually don't even buy like armor for them. They might get shot.
The guys at the back line. Yeah, I don't buy armor for them either.
There's no need. It's just a waste of money at the beginning.
Yeah, there's no need.
Later, of course, I'm trying to keep everyone alive as much as possible, but you're gonna have to face the music eventually. Like, you're gonna lose some brothers, and might as well gonna lose awful characters at the beginning, but have the numbers to surround the vagabonds, because they will break fairly easily in the very early game too. So if you can surround your enemy before they try to surround you, you're pretty much set at the first few battles.
And also, I'd point out, best case scenario, you start out with the cheaper guys who might not be superstars on the battlefield, but if you can get yourself set up where you have spare crowns and you can get more than 12 guys, keep an eye out for making the transition to the mid game. I've found classes like bastards, militiamen, I think disowned nobles are a little bit expensive. Even deserters. Deserters, look, it sucks that they have such a low resolve, but as long as you keep them next to your sergeant, that should be just good.
But you need a sergeant to make it work.
Exactly. but you will have a sergeant anyway. But the point is, at a certain point, you should be looking to replace your vagabonds, your farmhands, your guys who have low base attack skills with guys who are going to have higher base attack skills. Like, even though you're hiring militiamen and those type of classes a bit later on, you're still kind of fishing for what they're gonna bring to the table. It's one of the frustrations I find where, like, let's say I'll lose a frontline person. Like, okay, cool, I need someone who can be a tank and who can stay on the front lines. I'll go into a city and I'll find a militiaman who's described as being, despite his humble beginnings, he's actually an amazing fighter. So you go, cool, you hire him, and he's got 60 base melee skill, but he's got no stars. He's got 3 stars in ranged combat. You're like, oh, well, that's not what I needed. And kind of not great. But basically, be prepared, I find, and willing in the mid game to even get rid of some guys who you bought in the early game. There's nothing wrong with retiring guys and paying them off and say, well, thank you for your service, or you just keep them in reserve. Although that's moving out of the early game tactics, though. So In terms
I
of
really like your strategy of baiting the useless people. So really don't pay them at all.
I didn't do it on purpose, but on stream the other night I had what was his name, Gieselier, who I had right from the start, and the poor guy, he had survivor, so every time he got to 0 hit points, he would just be struck down. He had 4 permanent injuries at some point,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh man! But he was level 9 or something, so it would have cost me a couple hundred gold to let him retire, and I didn't have the money, so he ended up getting head bashed in by a zombie. The poor guy, rest in peace. So, in terms of skills, at level 1, the consensus seems to be you've got to take fast adaptation, and I think generally there's very few times you're not going to be taking fast adaptation at level 1.
To me, but again, I'm a pretty casual player, so I like to be comfortable. You know, I like to have a chill theme going on, just mostly waiting for the opposition to come if possible. So it comes down to be comfortable on the battlefield. So I'm a big fan of Pathfinder for the beginning, because you never know where you have to go. You
Yeah,
take a contract of swiping out some brigands, and their bases happen to be in a swamp. And we've all been there. We all know how much
getting bogged
fun
down in a
it
swamp, in
is.
a bog, if you will, is just a
And
nightmare.
Pathfinder can help you a ton, especially if they like pull out some throwing weapons. It's gonna eat their fatigue if they switch weapons all the time. I find it very very handy. Might not be the best strategy, but that's pretty much how I usually do. Yeah,
It's a
Pathfinder,
good one.
fast
So,
adaptation.
for those who aren't familiar, Pathfinder is learn to move on difficult terrain. Action point costs for movement on all terrain is reduced by -1 to a minimum of 2 action points per tile, and fatigue cost is reduced to half. Changing height levels also has no additional action point cost anymore. If I give Pathfinder to anyone, it's usually to my archers, because if let's say for example you start a fight, okay, it's a few enemy raiders and they've got some marksmen, and you know the battlefield is always generated randomly. So let's say you start on low ground and they start on high ground, you're like, oh for goodness. running your guys back is very very important, and Pathfinder is very very good for that. The other thing I use Pathfinder for, if one of my guys get the permanent injury clubfoot, increases action points per tile moved by +1. So very often, if someone gets a club foot, you have to give them Pathfinder on the next level, next time they level up, because you know, heaven forbid, if you have to run away, then if that person has a club foot, they're pretty much done for.
Yeah, you just counter whatever injury you have.
Yeah, I've also experimented with taking adrenaline. I was thinking of, for a time, giving my guys on the front line on the flanks adrenaline and Pathfinder, and then if you're up against ranged guys, you let them just wait on their first turn, let the enemy move, then you activate adrenaline, you run the 4 tiles, then the next turn starts, and that person gets to go immediately again, and that way they can cover 8 tiles and usually close into a ranged person. The problem with that is it costs, I think, 30 adrenaline to use, 30 fatigue to use adrenaline, and you're running across 8 tiles. So even if you manage to get your person into melee contact with an archer, he's going to be exhausted and he's going to be way out there and surrounded by enemies. So I haven't been able to make it work. Just
I see the appeal in it, most certainly, but it just never worked out for me. Especially if you take it early on, your brother will not be capable of hitting the enemy necessarily. So yeah, you get there and yeah, you can have the first hit, but it's not a guarantee it's gonna actually hit him. So plus
one other thing I want to point out is so student. One of my viewers did ask me, is there any reason to take anything other than student at level 1? And my answer was, well, I don't take student at level 1 on anybody, because similar to XCOM, Battle Brothers, I think, has somewhat of an inverse difficulty curve where it's most difficult in the student is cool. I mean, it accelerates your leveling up across all the other levels, but then basically you've gone from level 1 to level 2 without a perk point at that time. It pays off later on in the game, not early on in the game when your character that is weak. So I tend to take student on my brothers once they've got their core skill. My shield bearers need fast adaptation, Colossus, and shield bearer. Then I'll take student. Okay, I don't know. What's your experience been?
To be honest, I like to, at the very beginning of, obviously, like you said, it's we want something that can help you straight away, because the beginning is always one of the most difficult part of your campaign. So while it's appealing to level up faster, um, I think it's much better to have something like 9 lives, Colossus, fast adaptation, Pathfinder, something like that can instantly like have an impact in the next battle. And then maybe you can get the student perk. Again, I'm usually aiming for something that I can use whenever I want. So yeah, sure, I can get a little bit of experience here and there, but then maybe I will not be able to, I don't know, get Battle Force that I want to use later, and then realize, oh well, I'm out of perks. So I always have this fear in my mind whenever I use Colossus, Student, Fortify Mind, any of these. It's like, oh fuck, I missed on something else. That
I know what you mean. It's that thought of, hey, I needed to fill this hole, but I'm taking it at the expense of something else.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've covered the early game fairly well. Let's move on to viewer questions. If you have any questions that have been submitted to you, now's the time to cover them. For those of you watching, if there's anything you want to ask us tactically or anything at all, just please type in chat now. A couple, though, just looking at the comments from some of my YouTube videos that I wanted to cover. On one of the episodes, the one I discussed earlier, where I got completely cut to shreds by those necro savants, one of our viewers, Venless Nor, pointed out, you can cheese savants by retreating to the edge of the screen so they can't get at your backline so easily. Never done it personally. I tend to give the nets to my backline with quick hand guys and use maces and cleavers against them. Bleed is pretty good at countering 9 lives. You normally fight necro savants with legionaries types. I do find legionaries really tough though. Got to use every advantage against them. Feign retreat to pull them out of formation. Equip heater shields, always against undead as they can't break them, and use great swords and split to get at the pikemen. And then he just loves the series, tells me how great I am. Listen, so the whole point about cheesing the necro savants is a good one, but I don't see myself doing that either. I'd rather die honorably than cheese the AI like that.
Do you have the patience to like go to the corner of the map, take 3 turns and then do? I mean, yeah, it's not a bad move. I don't know. I like to enjoy the battle as strongly as it is. It might not be the best strategy to take them 1-on-1. What I like to do is usually I bring a lot of bandages, because they're gonna teleport away. And then you can stitch yourself up, and then you're gonna stop bleeding, hopefully. And then just hope for the best. I don't know.
Yeah,
I like to get rotation. No, not rotation.
Oh yeah.
What it is? Riposte. Sorry. So I'm trying to, because the really hard thing about them is that you can't really see where they're gonna go next. They will obviously attack your archers. There's no doubt about that. But then they often switch off when they see there's many enemy around them, and it's hard to anticipate where they're gonna go. But I'm trying to, whenever I can, I switch to swords and then riposte in hopes that they will attack that particular brother, and then hopefully we can get a hit. But the other thing is they are really skilled most of the time, so they're not gonna hit you or miss the hit.
Yeah. Like a necro savants are a freaking nightmare. In my current campaign, I chose a random late game prior season. I think I ended up with the green skin one, which I'm kind of glad for, because having to fight those necro savants more often seems like an absolute nightmare. They are so hard to fight against because of the way they teleport around. And again, shout out to maces. You got to stun lock those bastards and drop your war dogs, because that's just not fun to fight them. So next question, Kung Fu Chef asks, aren't you making your life harder by not giving the wolf armor to a frontline guy? That was when I managed to get the wolf armor finally, but I was using it on one of my I think it was on my pikemen on the back line. The wolf armor at that time still gave +5 resolve to the wearer rather than -5 to the person. Oh no, it's 5 days ago he said, so it would still be with the new patch then. Well, basically at the time, like, the problem with the wolf armor well, the base one, it only has 100 hit points. So if I'm choosing between 100 hit points and -5 resolve, or 110 points of armor, the frontline person, I'm probably going to give him the extra 10 points of armor. That could be the difference. Right or wrong, that's what I would tend to do. And the last thing I'll say is, I did recently do a hunt down what's terrorizing a village mission, and instead of being Nachtzaers or wolves, it was a bunch of guys dressed up as wolves. And four of the 6 of them were actually wearing chainmail wolf armor, which has 140 hit points of armor. Well, I think it's 12 fatigue, and I was like, oh baby. I think I got 2 of my guys killed, but I managed to dagger 2 of those guys down, and I got 2 sets of that armor, and it was just so good. 140 points of armor. Kidding?
Yeah,
and it's essentially a free set of armor.
The thing about that armor is that when you can get it, really, if it's later in the game, you won't be able to use it that much because you're gonna get better equipment, and then you want to use that. So if you can get you can get it early, sure, you want to give it to your flank, I guess. But later on, it's light armor, so obviously people will not have that great of a fatigue to begin with. Usually we tend to put them in the back row for pole arms. I think that's pretty common thing to do. So obviously you're gonna go for the best light armor you can get them. So later on, it makes more sense to me to give them that. In the very early game, of course, it's really useful. It's probably the best light armor in the game.
Yeah, but getting it can be so unreliable. I did wonder, sorry to interrupt you, but I did think about one thing. If you get a tailor, I have noticed you can actually take the large wolf pelts and you can put it in their inventory. I don't know if that has any sort of effect on whether or not you get the armor sooner. It seems to be totally random either way. It doesn't seem to change. I don't think that is the case. Okay, so I don't know if you have any viewer submitted questions. We've only just started this little podcast thing, so there aren't that many questions to draw from just yet. Please leave, if you have any questions for us, leave them here in the comments or ask us now, and we'll be sure to pick them up in the next podcast. Do you have anything that you wanted to bring up here, Bosco, from viewer questions?
No, actually I didn't get. But that's quite all right. Should we do some sort of hashtag so that people could to shoot questions like on Twitter in the future or something like that?
It's a very good question. Very good suggestion. What should it be? Hashtag, I don't know, BB questions. I don't know.
Hashtag as brothers.
As brothers. There you go. Cool. So hashtag as brothers for all your questions and generally comments. Please be nice to us. We are very gentle beings.
I really like that saying in the game. I think it really sets the mood for some reason.
We are leaving ourselves open to some typical trolls who are gonna probably give us something like that.
Yeah,
Ass brothers, but I think that's gonna be probably a link to something else.
Oh.
I'll just have to see how that goes.
Well, eventually we're gonna upload these on YouTube so they can
Yes, these will be available both on my YouTube channel and on Bosco's channel. So let's move on to our last little segment, build of the week or build of the fortnight or month. We still haven't quite figured out how often we're going to be doing this thing. So Bosco and I are each going to suggest a themed build that we either going to be playing on our channels or that we would encourage you guys to go try yourselves. So what I've been thinking of, I was inspired by Tyrion Lannister's little saying in Game of Thrones, where he said cripples, bastards and broken things, which I believe was also the name of one of the episodes. And the idea is your group of brothers are all outcasts, so you're only allowed to hire cripples, refugees, beggars and vagabonds in the early game. Then moving on to the mid to late game, because I've been thinking about how totally not viable that would be long term. Towards the mid game, you can then start hiring, I suppose, a disowned noble could sort of, because he's disowned, or bastards, and then what else are there? There's deserters as well, which can take you into the mid to late game. So that's actually what I'm going to be streaming this evening. I'm going to be doing my cripples, bastards, and broken things playthrough.
Hell yeah, I'm gonna watch the shit out of it.
Watch my little cripples who've got like 40 melee skill. It's probably like
Yeah,
some guy missing an eye trying to be an archer.
it would be nice to see someone in my shoes for once.
Well, speaking of that, I know that you've actually got a quite interesting one. Is there one you wanted to suggest for a build of the month?
I was actually thinking I usually come up with experiments uh, about which weapons to use or something
Mm,
like that. But I'm gonna go with something similar you suggested, and I think my board would be the rebels, and then get outlaws, gamblers, the
murderers,
diggers, and
murderer
maybe
on the run.
peasants. Yeah, murders definitely. All of the bad guys plus peasants maybe because in history they were the ones that
Indeed, you could
started
even
the rebellion.
you could even stretch that theme to looking at the description of the guys. I was surprised when I was about to hire a fisherman, and it's describing like how, oh, this guy is such a hard worker. He was out there day and night, but one night he murdered his wife, and now he wants to do something different. And you're like, what? He just casually strangled his wife, and I was looking for like, what the hell, dude? Fishing Monday morning, bit of wife
Yeah,
murder in the
it's
evening,
pretty
and
random.
that's so random.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Yeah, stretch it and those guys too. So yeah, the rebellion. That's gonna be my bold for this episode.
Cool. I'll be sure to check it out when I'm too tired to stream myself and watch you stream it. I know it'll be up on your YouTube. So, okay, I think that's about it for this week. We've covered a fair few things like the upcoming release date. We discussed some of the patch notes, some early game tactics, a couple of viewer questions, hopefully a few more next time. And then we've suggested our builds of the week. Now, I reckon we'll try to do another one of these in 2 to 3 weeks' time. So please submit your questions, ask us anything you want to know, make any suggestions for your build of the month, which we can try as well. And then in terms of getting a guest, we can think of a few things. Let's not shout out anybody just yet. Let's see who we can get. But considering the fact that we discussed early game tactics this week, I think we should have a bit more of a dive into mid game tactics round about the days where it's like day 30 to day 70, making the transition from taking your really really basic bitch brothers and turning them into a bit more of an elite fighting unit. And then episode 3 of the podcast, we can look at proper late game, dealing with the late game crisis and pushing onto that. I suggest next time we do this, we jump into the perk tree and go through each perk in detail and really sort of theory craft around the perks, because that really is the meat of this game, where a lot of the tactics tend to go is how you level your guys.
Yeah, sure. Sounds fun.
Okay, so that's it for this week. I'm Stobbie from 9, joined by Oscar the Bear. This is when you
And
say hi.
don't forget to check out Stobbie if you are watching my video.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I'll include links both to my YouTube and Twitch channels, and we'll do the same thing for Bosco as well. But this is the As Brothers podcast, and thanks for watching.